Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for being here. This is a very important topic to All Saints Church and to all of us personally. And I'm deeply grateful to vestry member Virginia Classic for putting this together. Let me say just a couple of words about the Gun Violence Task Force at All Saints Church. After the Newtown Sandy Hook shootings, we pledged ourselves to do everything we could at All Saints to keep people from forgetting that this was an issue. Because the only thing that would be more horrible than what we've experienced in Newtown is for us to have more massacres, and then for us to feign some kind of surprise and horror. But unfortunately, that's exactly what has happened. People are continuing to be killed by guns, and we have Congress, an entire city of Washington, D.C., and local legislators who seem to be in the pockets of those gun manufacturers and all of their money. So I, along with the members of this parish who are in the vestry and the members of the Gun Violence Task Force, have committed ourselves to do something on a regular basis so that we could kind of be kept current with what's going on, and there's a lot of good going on as well. So I'm deeply grateful to Virginia Classic for organizing this. Virginia is, when she was working full-time for money, she was a social worker. Now she works full-time for God, and God doesn't pay very well, but except in benefits of the heart and also of impact on other people. She is our person, not only representing All Saints, but certainly our person who represents us on a board of the national group working against torture, and also connected with peace organizations about international peacemaking and peacekeeping and peace building, and also this issue having to do with gun violence. She has brought to us today two very important and fruitful activists. Lauren Lieb became an activist when her own family was involved in gun violence, a story she'll tell us about. She's a career epidemiologist, 30-year career in public health, master's in public health from UCLA, and a wide public speaking vocation. She's recently spoken to the Board of Rabbis annual meeting and a town hall led by Congressperson Adam Schiff. And she's on the board of the Brady campaign. We'll hear about all of this also. Margot Bennett is with us, another fruitful activist. She has an MBA in nonprofit management and has spent more than 20 years in nonprofits related to children and gun violence. And she's a member of the Women Against Gun Violence, which was established by the great feminist Betty Friedan over 20 years ago. So I want you to welcome all of these people, and Virginia will be up first. Will you please warmly welcome them?
What an extraordinary coincidence that this morning's New York Times leads with a long article, Children and Guns, the Hidden Toll. This article highlights the very issues about which Lauren and Margot will be speaking. I've worked on gun violence prevention for 20 years, and I mention this only to remind all of us what a long, hard struggle this is. After the Sandy Hook shootings, there was a groundswell of determination. This time would be different. This time, there would be sustained commitment to the work of reducing and preventing gun violence. This would be a turning point, a watershed moment in the history of this movement. The defeat of the background check bill in the Senate, in spite of strong support from a majority of people throughout this country, was a stark reality check of what a long, hard struggle this is going to be. All Saints Church has engaged in and stayed with long, hard struggles for social justice and peacemaking. this movement has come to the right place. Ours is a parish with enormous potential for individual and collective action. Ours is a parish with capacity and vision to provide significant leadership in the wider community. Christian ethicist David Gushee, in his visits to All Saints, has reminded us of the resources that we as a faith community have in our sacred text and faith traditions to root and sustain our work for social justice and peacemaking. We are residents of this country, and yet we are first citizens of the reign of God. And that reign holds out for us a vision for our work, for peacemaking, to reduce and prevent gun violence. Isaiah puts it this way: I shall rejoice over Jerusalem and exult in my people. No more will the sound of weeping or the sound of cries be heard in her. From the prophet Micah, they will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Each of them will sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one will make them afraid. And from the prophet Zechariah, once again, old men and women will walk in Jerusalem's streets with their canes and sit together in the city squares. And the streets of the city will be full of boys and girls playing. This is what the prophetic voice says to us here today. I am so pleased to have with me two indefatigable women. I learned that word from Ed. Margot Bennett, the Executive Director of Women Against Gun Violence, and Lauren Lieb, my colleague in the Brady chapter, to help us continue the ongoing work of educating and equipping our parish for sustained commitment, bringing in that vision with communities free of all forms of gun violence and the effects of these weapons of violence on all of us. So, Lauren.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome, and I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to be here this morning and to speak with you all about this important issue. A shooting 14 years ago is what has brought me here today. The date was August 10th, 1999. Buford Furrow, a white supremacist and neo-Nazi, loaded his car with guns and ammunition and drove from Washington State to Los Angeles. He walked into a Jewish community center in Granada Hills and started shooting. He fired about 70 rounds in a matter of seconds. He hit 5 people and terrorized hundreds of little children, mostly 5- and 6-year-olds, who were there for summer day camp. Little kids huddled in the classrooms to avoid being shot, and the kids that didn't have any place to hide were hit. The teenage counselors tried their best to protect the kids and lead them to safety. A 16-year-old counselor played dead after being shot to avoid being shot again. My 6- and 8-year-old boys were at camp that day, and my 6-year-old son was shot twice. He and the others survived their wounds, but the emotional scars of something like that last a lifetime. The shooter later went on to murder a postal worker who was delivering mail on his rounds that day. So a little bit about the shooter and how this happened. He was a prohibited purchaser. He had a history of mental illness. He bought guns at a gun show without a background check. He had an assault weapon and high-capacity magazines, and he brought his guns into California from another state. Our lax national gun policy facilitated this shooting, and really nothing has changed in the 14 years since then to stop things like this from happening. So here are some of the issues. And there are a number of issues that I want to talk about, and I know this is something that you are all familiar with, so I'm going to maybe go a little quickly over these so that we have, so there can be enough time for discussion at the end. But you know that gun laws vary widely from state to state. And there are really only a handful of federal gun laws. So the statements you hear about the thousands and thousands of laws we already have on the books, that we just need to enforce those laws, well, those are not federal laws. They're state specific. And as long as we don't have a national gun policy, the states with the weak gun laws, such as those bordering California, will always put California, which is a state with very strong gun laws, some of the strongest in the country, those states with weak laws are putting us in jeopardy here in California because guns can very easily cross state borders. So no matter what is happening, unless every state has really strong laws, we need an effective national gun policy. It's very easy for a dangerous person to get their hands on a gun. A background check is only required nationally. This is federal law. A background check is only required for a purchase from a federally licensed firearm dealer. Now, in California, we have a different law. But again, because other states don't, their weak laws put us in jeopardy. So it's easy for a person to buy a gun completely outside of the background check system, either at a gun show or on the internet or in so-called private sales. And about 40% of all firearm purchases in the US occur without a background check. Now that 40% equates to about 6 million guns every year purchased without a background check. Those are guns that could end up in the hands of a felon, a terrorist, a domestic abuser, no questions asked. There was recent news footage of a gun buyback that was happening in Tucson. And so gun buybacks are where normally law enforcement provides an opportunity for people to turn in guns that they no longer want, and they get in return a gift card for $100 or $200 for the guns that they return. And this helps to get just people's unwanted guns out of their house. Then they won't pose a risk to people in the home. They're not a risk of being stolen. So at this gun buyback in Tucson, the police were there ready, all set up for their gun buyback, but there were groups of protesters a block ahead, waving their $100 bills. So someone who was coming to the buyback to turn their gun into police could decide, instead, rather than getting a $100 Visa card, they could sell their gun for cash to somebody standing on the corner. Now, this is not a private sale that the gun lobby would like you to believe, where they say, oh, well, why should, Grandpa handing down his prized rifle to his grandson, that shouldn't have to go through a background check. That's a private sale. Well, private sale extends far beyond family transactions. And this type of a transfer on the street, on the corner, no paperwork, no nothing, there was nothing that could be done to prevent it. And public opinion polls show that the vast majority of Americans want a background check for every sale. That includes NRA members, it includes gun owners, it includes Republicans. There is wide support, and it includes gun dealers, licensed gun dealers. They want background checks for every sale as well. Background checks save lives. We know that background checks have stopped about 2 million prohibited purchasers from buying a gun. And the most common reason why a prohibited purchaser is denied is because they were a convicted felon. So these background checks stop guns from getting into the hands of dangerous people. In a lot of states, it's easier to buy a gun than it is to buy a bottle of Sudafed. And if you think about it, at the airport, where now we all have to go through the TSA screening, what kind of public outcry would there be if about 40% of the people could say, nah, not today. I'm not going to go through the checkpoint. I'm just going to go around it. I don't think we would accept that. So why do we accept this dangerous situation to occur time and time again? While some states have recently passed passed laws to strengthen their gun laws, here's what some states are doing to weaken their laws. Iowa is now issuing permits, open carry permits for people who are blind. North Carolina has prohibited law enforcement from destroying guns that are collected in buybacks, because that's generally what police do. They get these guns, these unwanted guns, they take them, and then they're melted down and used for something. The metal is used for something else. North Carolina has made that illegal. The police cannot destroy the guns. They have to either store them or sell them back, sell them to the public. So what's the point of that? South Dakota has become the first state to explicitly allow school employees to carry guns at school. And some states are trying to make it a felony to enforce federal gun laws. So and again, because these laws put us all at jeopardy. These lax gun laws are putting the rest of our lives in jeopardy. We know that guns are inherently dangerous products, right? That's what they're designed to do. And if they work like they're designed to do, you kill something with it. Well, we have the Consumer Product Safety Commission, which is charged with protecting the public from unreasonable risk of injury or death from consumer products under their jurisdiction. However, guns and ammunition are not under their jurisdiction. And in fact, there is no federal agency responsible for overseeing the safety of firearms. It is an inherently dangerous product, but it can be made safer. Guns can have something to tell you if there's a bullet in the chamber that might avert the hundreds of unintentional shootings that occur when someone takes the clip out, maybe a child, they're going to show off a gun to their dad's gun to their friend. They think they've removed the ammunition, but there's a bullet in the chamber. And then something disastrous happens. There can be technology called smart gun technology, so that a gun could only be used by an authorized user. You know, I think the new Apple iPhones are going to have fingerprint recognition. You can get on your phone. Why isn't the gun industry trying to come up with products that are safer to avoid terrible accidents and to ensure that if your gun gets stolen, someone else can't just take it and use it in the commission of a crime? I think in the Navy Yard shooting just recently, one of the guns that he ended up using was one of the security guards' guns. So while the Consumer Product Safety Commission issues recalls for cribs and teddy bears and sweatshirts, there have not ever been and will not be a Consumer Product Safety Commission recall of a faulty or unsafe firearm. I frequently check the Consumer Product Safety Commission website just to kind of see what's going on and what's the latest recall, because they issue recalls all the time. So I did just look the other day, 2 days ago, and some of the things that they have from Toys R Us. A Journey Girl trunk is being recalled because the handle on the trunk might be sharp and cause a laceration hazard. And a Build-A-Bear stuffed teddy bear being recalled because the eyes can pose a choking hazard. Now, a lot of these things are recalled because there's a potential for harm. Not even that someone has been harmed yet, but there is the potential for harm, and so the product is recalled. But a $5 disposable camera will tell you if it's ready to shoot a picture, but a gun won't tell you if it's ready to shoot a bullet. The capacity is there to have some of these safety features in place, but the gun industry has no incentive to do that. And another reason, why, partly there's no oversight by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Another reason why they have no incentive is because a law was passed several years back that protects the gun industry from lawsuits. So while for most products, if you're harmed by a product, you could seek redress through the courts. But in 2005, at the behest of the gun industry, Congress passed a law that shields the gun makers from being sued for harm caused by their products. And it immediately dismissed all state and federal, any suits in state and federal court, and prohibited any future claims. There is no other industry that enjoys this type of protection. So they're protected from lawsuits, and there's no safety oversight. So what incentive do they have to try and make any improvements? And the answer, of course, is none. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, or the ATF, is responsible for enforcing federal gun laws. But again, ATF has been severely hamstrung in their ability to monitor gun dealers, to monitor their actions. And these restrictions have been imposed by Congress. ATF's record keeping is by design an antiquated manual system for researching guns used in crime and for monitoring gun trafficking. They're prohibited from requiring gun dealers to conduct annual inventories of their stock, and these inventories are important so that to make sure that gun dealers are accounting for every gun in their inventory to interrupt gun trafficking. The gun manufacturers knowingly flood the market with more guns than can be sold on the legal market, and so then these guns are diverted to the criminal market in the US and in Mexico. And just a small number of the gun dealers are responsible for feeding the criminal market. So the vast majority of gun dealers are honest operators, but there are bad apple dealers that are linked to more than half of the guns used in crime. And the ATF really lacks the power to crack down on these. Many of our elected officials and the gun lobby will claim to vigorously support enforcement of the laws currently on the books. But then really behind the scenes, they're working very hard to put all kinds of impediments in place so the laws really cannot be enforced. Then at some point later down the road, they'll circle back and say, well, but you're not enforcing the laws we already have on the books. Well, the reason they're not being enforced is because they have orchestrated this impediment to enforcement. Just a little about why we really need to be concerned about all this. I mean, the high-profile shootings that have occurred, I think, are enough to convince anyone. But just some of the numbers, and I won't go into a lot of them. There's some fact sheets at the back table that have all this information there. About 100,000 people every year are directly affected by gun violence. That's 30,000 people who are killed and about 70,000 people who are injured and survive their injuries. Now, those are the people directly affected. Then there's family and friends. It ripples. So there's, it's far beyond the 100,000 people directly affected. I'm here. This has changed my life, my husband's life, both of our sons' lives, because of an incident that happened 14 years ago. So it goes far beyond the people directly affected. That calculates out to about 280 people who are shot every single day. Of those 280 people shot every single day, about 85 of them die. 8 of those who die are children. The majority of firearm deaths in the US are suicides. Most suicides are with a gun, and most suicide attempts with a gun are successful. And sadly, most suicides are completed at home using the family gun. Now, many people mistakenly believe that a person who wants to end their life will do it, and if a weapon is not available, they'll find another means. But that really is not true. Suicide is an impulsive act, and attempts with a less lethal means, often there's an opportunity for an intervention, the person to survive that attempt. And research shows that people who have attempted suicide one time do not go on to complete a suicide sometime later in their life. They follow these people for years and years and years, and over 95% of them do not end up committing suicide later on. So if you can, it's an impulsive act, and if you can keep the lethal means away from someone, you can save a life. Most homicides are committed with a gun, and victims of firearm assaults often know who their attacker are. Few homicides are really carefully planned in advance. Oh, you have 3 minutes. Okay, skip that. Okay, so let me tell you, guns in the home are dangerous. They increase the risk of homicide, suicide, and unintentional shootings. Let me talk a minute about unintentional shootings, because there are about 30% of American households that have a gun in the home. That's a lot of guns. And many people keep their guns stored unlocked and loaded. Unlocked and loaded. You can store a gun safely in your home if it's locked and if it's unloaded and the ammunition is stored separately. But people don't do that because they want to be able to use it right away. And a child as young as 3 years old has the strength to pull the trigger on a gun. And many accidental shootings at home happen with the parent's gun that they think is safely hidden away from the kids. What parents don't realize is their children know where the gun is. We lead the world in per capita gun ownership. There are about 300 million guns in the United States. That's that's 89 guns for every 100 people. There are more guns here than than anywhere else in the world. If guns made us safer, we'd be really safe, but we know that's not the case. Guns are the 5th leading cause of premature death in the United States, but the money spent on research is just a fraction of what it is for other things that don't cause as many deaths as guns do. And why is that? Because Congress has restricted funding for research. Okay, so let me get to what can you do? What can you do? There are lots of things. There are so many things that you can do. If you have a gun, store it safely. And we have some brochures in the back that can help you have this conversation. If your child is going to someone else's house, your child, your grandchildren, your niece or nephew, anyone that you know, a child going to someone else's house, you need to make sure that there are not unsafely stored guns in that home. It might be an awkward conversation to have. We have a brochure to help you with that. Tell your legislators. Make sure your legislators know how you feel. And you have to do this repeatedly with phone calls, with letters. I know you're letter writing here. We've delivered some letters that were written here. And that's extremely important because we always hear that the pro-gun activists are more active than we are. Educate your family and friends on these issues. Talk to other people and connect with other groups and people who are in positions to influence others, such as physicians, mental health providers, faith groups, youth groups, educators. You need to get in touch with those who have exposure to broad audiences and tell them that you're concerned about this. Make sure you're talking with your checkbook and spend your money at businesses that support sensible gun policies. You may have heard recently the issue with Starbucks, where Starbucks refused to establish a national policy for their stores to not allow guns in the stores. They said, we'll just comply with state law. And in a lot of states, it's perfectly legal to openly carry a gun. So Starbucks became a meeting place for people to show up with their big rifles slung across their chests and just act like bullies. Why do you need to take a big gun with you when you go to get a cup of coffee? But they would do it just to protest and show that it's my right, so I'm going to do it. And there has been a sustained protest against Starbucks for many years, and they refuse to come out with a policy. Their employees are not allowed to bring a gun to work, and they would not allow guns in their headquarters, but it was okay for the patrons to bring guns into the store. But just recently, Starbucks finally came out and said, you know, your guns are not welcome here. So that has been a huge turnaround, and it's been years in coming. But, you know, I made it a point, even though it wasn't an issue here because open carrying is not legal in California, but I would, when I'd see my friends with a carry, I mean, everybody's walking around with a cup of Starbucks, I would say, you got to stop going to Starbucks, and here's why. And Pete's Coffee, that had a no-gun policy, I said, don't go to Starbucks anymore, go to Pete's. So you need to patronize businesses that have sensible gun policies. And you need to let them know that that's why you're doing it. California Pizza Kitchen does not allow guns in their restaurants. So, you know, if you go to CPK, say, you know, tell the manager, I came here because I appreciate your policy. I'm done. There's a list of organizations that you can get involved with in the back. I hope you will sign up, get their e-alerts, go on their Facebook pages.
Hello, my name's Margot Bennett, and I'm the Executive Director of Women Against Gun Violence. And thank you so much for having me here today. It's truly an honor to address you. Between 1999 and 2010, 364,483 people were killed by gun violence in the United States. Approximately 5,000 were children under the age of 14, and approximately 800 of those child deaths were unintentional. And at this moment, I just want to address a language issue. So frequently people will refer to these as accidental deaths, but I feel very strongly that we need to refer to them as unintentional, because it's no accident when a gun kills someone. That's its purpose. It's fulfilling its gun destiny. So I and Women Against Gun Violence refuse to refer to these as accidental deaths, and we will only use the term unintentional. So back to the 800 of the child deaths that were unintentionally caused by guns. There's a report just this weekend in the New York Times that Virginia referred to on unintentional gun violence against children. And it reports that the figures that I just presented with you are both understated and disproportionately affecting young boys. So please consider reading this article when you have a chance. Women Against Gun Violence has a sign-up sheet. If you leave us your email address, I'll send you a link to that article so that you can read it. And so now I just want to tell you a little bit about some of the children who have lost their lives due to unintentional gun violence just this year alone. You'll have to bear with me. I always get emotional. Eric Cleas was 10 years old when he was shot on June 4th, 2013. He and a 9-year-old friend found a gun in a San Diego garage. The gun went off when they were playing with it, unintentionally shooting Eric in the chest. Brandon Holt, 6 years old, was shot April 8th, 2013. He was shot by his 4-year-old neighbor after the younger child found a loaded rifle in his home. Alyssa Carlson, 6 years old, shot June 30th, 2013, unintentionally shot by her 4-year-old brother after they found the grandfather's handgun and her younger brother pulled the trigger. Kinsler Davis, 2 years old, shot himself on May 11th after finding a handgun in his home and unintentionally shooting himself in the head. Trinity Ross, 4 years old, shot on January 10th. She had just turned 4 years old when she was shot by a 6-year-old boy who had found the gun her father accidentally left sitting on a living room chair. Ella Tucker, 3 years old, shot on September 7th, 2013, just this month, after shooting herself with a handgun while visiting Yellowstone National Park. Park rangers responded, but were unable to resuscitate her. Women Against Gun Violence believes that every single one of these deaths, in fact, every single one of the approximately 800 unintentional child deaths, could have been avoided. These deaths were not caused by gang violence, suicide, or domestic disputes. These deaths were not caused by anger or assault or in self-defense. These deaths were caused simply because the owners of the guns did not lock them up and store them safely away. We've been around for 20 years here in Los Angeles County working to prevent gun violence in our communities. And we do this in several ways. We do it legislatively. We encourage activism on the part of our community members. And more importantly, we do it through our programs that reach out to families. We say that we educate, motivate, and advocate. One of our signature program is our TALK program. Talk to your kids about guns, ask your neighbors about guns, lock your guns up, keep your kids safe. This program works with parents to teach them how to talk to their children about guns, and importantly, how to talk with your neighbors about guns and safe gun storage. If parents own guns, we encourage them to store their guns safely. It is a non-judgmental program. Its purpose is not to shame gun owners. We found that that is not effective. But its purpose is to recognize gun ownership and to encourage gun owners to store their guns safely so that we can keep our children safe and our community safe. We do this through adult school programs, Mommy and Me classes, and we work with the Los Angeles School Police Department. This year alone, we've distributed over 700 free gun locks to gun owners through community health fairs and special locations throughout Los Angeles County. Which leads me to the Pasadena Gun Buyback and Peace Fair, an event you raised significant money to sponsor. We are so grateful to all of you, and to Virginia, and to Juliana, who worked so hard in planning and implementing this important event. We attended the Peace Fair to specifically distribute our talk materials that include our Ask brochure, which is in Spanish and English, that talks about talking with your neighbors about guns. Lauren showed you a copy of that brochure, the Brady campaign and other groups also hand out. It includes our Lock It Up brochure, which is also in Spanish and English, that talks about locking up guns. And it includes our Talking to Kids About Guns, once again in Spanish and English, that talks about how to talk to your kids about guns. That day at the Peace Fair, we distributed over 200 sets of materials, some to other organizations who then redistributed them to their constituents. And I've brought copies of all of those materials today. Please help yourself. So another really important thing that happened at the Peace Fair and at the gun buyback was that we formed collaborations that were facilitated by your efforts that have led us to expand our talk program in a very significant way. So this is our first public announcement. We haven't done a press release. We haven't talked to the press at all. So I'm announcing today that because of you and because of the funding we received through a collaboration at the Peace Fair, we are distributing all of those materials to every parent of an elementary school child in the city of Pasadena. The Pasadena School District has graciously approved our materials to be distributed in their take-home packets. 7,768 elementary school students attending one of the 16 elementary schools in Pasadena will be taking home our gun safety information to their parents, and we owe that program to you. So thank you. Now what's really exciting is just this Friday, I was participating in a conference call with the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence and States United to Prevent Gun Violence, and they're interested in using the Pasadena distribution as a model and our materials, and we're gonna roll it out nationwide. So even, this is so important because even though we don't have specific evidence related to education and gun safety, we do have scientific evidence that relates to other public safety campaigns, such as the smoking campaign. And all of the statistics and all of the reports show that when public safety information was distributed about smoking, the rates of new smokers declined radically, and smokers quitting increased radically. And that's when people just received the truth and information that would help them. And so that's what we're applying now to the gun safety issue. We still need your help, and we hope that the activists and the hardworking people here today can help us. So we're rolling out this program, but we want to take it to other school districts in Southern California. So what we're hoping is if you sign our sign-up sheet, which is in the back with your email address, we can connect, and that you can help us through your connections with the school districts elsewhere, with school boards, that we can then approach them with our materials so that we can distribute them to their elementary schools as well. Once we get the approval of those school districts, then we'll go out and secure funding. We believe that this is a highly fundable project. What corporation or foundation wouldn't want their name on the materials that are helping to keep children safe. But then we would need your help to start packaging them all up to distribute. And in fact, in the next 2 weeks, we're going to be doing all the packaging for the Pasadena School District. So once again, if anybody wants to help count out 7,000 plus brochures, please give us an email or a call. So I just want to say thank you again. Throughout history, all successful change has started at the grassroots movement, at the grassroots level, and we're in it for the long fight. We believe you are too. So let's make a difference.
Wonderful, thank you.
Ed will moderate some questions and answers, but Jill Shook, will you please, can we acknowledge you? Because you had this vision for the gun buyback, and you and Juliana worked so closely together. Jill, thank you so much.
Thank you. We have some microphones coming. Because we're streaming this, we need for you to wait until a microphone comes, but the hands are up right there, and right there. So go ahead, please.
Hello.
Go ahead.
First of all, thank you for your information. I just am trying to figure out how some of the things that you have talked about would have affected two shootings. For example, the young man with the Sandy Hook shooting, if it was his mother's gun, so if there had been some sort of safety device where if he used his thumbprint and it didn't match whatever was programmed for the gun, he wouldn't have been able to use the gun, and that might have been averted. I understand that. But then I think of the young man in Tucson. I used to live in Tucson. I know that corner where all that shooting occurred. I know the community college that young man went to. And my question was, this young man was obviously mentally ill. And apparently he'd never received mental help. So if he went to buy a gun and there was nothing there on a background check that showed he was mentally ill, he might still have been able to buy the gun. And so how would anything that you've talked about today have prevented that really massacre?
Well, there are a couple of issues. The bar right now for preventing people with mental illness from acquiring a gun is set relatively high. They have to have been adjudicated mentally ill or involuntarily hospitalized. That threshold perhaps needs to be a little bit lower. And also, there are many states that have not put their mental health records into the background check system. So it has a lot of flaws, a lot of holes, a lot of gaps, and those are some of the things that need to be tightened up and strengthened with an improved background check system. The other thing is that we all recognize we can't stop everything. I mean, there will still be some that will get through the cracks, but we can go a long way to improve the current situation. And absolutely having owner-authorized weapons would prevent a lot of these from somebody taking someone else's gun and using it.
Some years ago, I was the director of the Commission on Social Justice for the Archdiocese of San Francisco. And Dianne Feinstein was the mayor at that time. And we had a gun buyback campaign. It was very successful. But I want to say one thing about the New York Times article. I recommend it strongly to everybody to pass it out everywhere. And I have a suggestion to make. When you go into schools, there's a story in that New York Times article that I can't get out of my head. And it's that a 4-year-old little boy found his father's loaded pistol under his father's pillow. And he shot himself and killed himself with it. Tell the little kids when you're there, if your parents have guns under the pillow, tell them to get them out of there.
Okay. One last question.
I wanted to thank you guys for everything that you do. I wanted to make 2 suggestions. I heard of a really good idea where if someone wants to get a job, they normally have to put 3 references down, and if the employer is dutiful, they'll call those 3 references and say, hey, should we hire this person? People don't really want to put the name down on somebody they don't think is good. So the idea is to transfer that same thing to gun purchasing. Not only would you have to pass the background check, but there's 3 people who would have to attest. So if you're a parent and although your child may not have been in the mental health system, if you think that they're not stable, you say, sorry, Johnny, I'm not comfortable putting my name down there. I'm not going to be a good reference when they call. I'm going to say no. So that's the first idea that you may want to explore more. And then the second thing is, it seems like the sort of violence prevention that's been the best and sort of most hard-hitting for the least amount of money, and it's also the most painful, so I'm just making this as a suggestion, is to potentially go to the gun shows, because the peace meetings are really useful for certain things, and the gun shows are also useful for certain things, because if you can reach the people who are putting their guns under the pillow, you can reach the people who aren't locking their guns and hand them the lock right as they're walking in or out. That might be a really useful way to do it. But thank you for all that you do. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, friends. Thank you very, very much. See you all next week.